I'm sure folks will be logging in and registering as we begin. So I'd like to welcome everyone to MacroPro and Friends. We're hosting this special edition of MacroPro and Friends, and it's one of our many webinars that we're hosting to add to our portfolio, of educational opportunities for our clients. Today, we're going to talk about coronavirus and the effects it's having on all of us in the claims industry. This part's important, so I need to pay attention. This presentation today is 1 hour of CEU credits for the state of California. If you've logged in via your registration confirmation, a certificate will be emailed to you within 36 hours of this presentation. If you're calling in, you need to join us via your confirmation email in order to receive your certificate. Little technical difficulty. So this morning we are, can you hear me, Diane?
Yes.
Okay. So this morning we are being joined by four panelists, and they are experts in their field. Our first speaker is Brian Pierce. He's with MedRisk. We have William Davis of Hannah Brophy, Chris Bowen of Work Comp Resolutions, and then I'm Wendy Stevens, and I'm with MacroPro. Brian, we're going to go ahead and begin with Telerehab.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Pierce. I'm a physical therapist by trade, and I serve as Director of Clinical Services for MedRisk. So that leaves me in charge of clinical oversight for a network of providers from coast to coast. As you can imagine, historically, almost all of our treatment has been provided in the clinic, but now with the situation at hand, we have situations where we have injured workers who are unable to get out of their homes and get into the clinic, and also we have providers that are unable to keep the doors to their clinic open. So in these times, telerehab, the idea of seeing patients from a distance, has really been foisted to the forefront of physical medicine. So I'm going to start with talking a little bit about what telerehab is and how it works. So the general term that you hear thrown around is telehealth. That's the biggest kind of overarching umbrella term that encompasses all the services that a medical provider can offer from a distance. So that would include telephonic, that would include video, that would include also even any medium that you could see somebody without them face to face. So in some circumstances, that includes digital communication. Telemedicine would be the component of that that deals specifically with physician care. So these terms are somewhat interchanged, but technically speaking, telehealth could include something like getting reports on blood work, to working with a physical trainer, to dealing with a physical therapist, all of that being from a distance, interfacing with a nurse or a case manager. Telemedicine will be the physician care, and then what we're talking about today is telerehab, which would be a subset of telehealth that deals specifically with providing physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. Telerehab has been offered around the world for years and years. It hasn't been as big of an issue in the United States because we have access to care that isn't really matched in many other countries. So some parts of the world where the therapist has no choice but to see a patient from a distance if they intend on seeing them at the frequency that they want to see them. So in the United States, we have the luxury of having less access issues. So the times in the United States where you've typically seen telerehab is in circumstances where someone is really in a rural area, or maybe in Alaska, where in certain parts of the year it will be difficult to get to physical medicine. Certain parts of Western Texas where there's just not a provider within a reasonable amount of distance. Under those circumstances, under the right level of severity, you would see a therapist seeing patients from a distance. But a couple of years back, we started this program at MedRisk of being able to see patients from a distance, which would be seeing general orthopedic patients from a distance. And we were taking our lead from the work that's been done overseas on how to handle things like shoulder pain and back pain, et cetera. Our model was such that patients would always start with an in-clinic experience whenever possible. So they would go into the clinic just like anybody else would for physical therapy. But if they had the interest or the need to be seen from a distance with a therapist located remotely, they'd be able to go down that road. That ability to see those patients was something that we were able to really capitalize on those types of injured workers who really needed this because of their travel schedule or because of their physical location. but it was a very small percentage of the types of patients that we would see. Maybe 1% of the volume we would see would be from a distance. Now, of course, with what's going on now, that changes a little bit, and there's a lot more interest in being able to see your therapist or from a distance. So right now, the program that we have in place looks a little different than it has historically. We have the ability now to see patients at any point, any state in the country, and see them from their home or from their work site, anywhere that they choose to connect, and we can see them from beginning to end. So where we used to start patients in the clinic and see them, wait till they've been evaluated, assessed, and make some progress, and then transition them into remote care, now we're able to see them at the very onset of care if their condition allows, if their circumstance allows for it. So they have to be able to connect from a distance. So that means any device that's capable of delivering video transmission and audio transmission. So they can do it from a smartphone, they could do it from a tablet, or they could do it from a laptop. 90% of the time, our patients connect on their smart devices, smartphones. We still see some patients occasionally connect on a laptop. Our therapists connect from their homes, and they are not going into a physical location at this point either, and they'll connect with the patient at a prearranged time. So whereas in some physical medicine situations, people log in and sit in a waiting room and wait for someone to become available, our appointments as best as they can, we try and mirror the in-clinic experience, which would be setting a time and arranging to see your therapist. So the therapy experience, for those of you who have been engaged in it before, you know that it's somewhat passive and somewhat active. So sometimes you're having someone do something to you, put you on a hot pack or a cold pack, stretch out your muscles or manipulate your spine. And then sometimes you're doing things actively, which would be active exercise or functional training, lift training, things like that. In telerehab, we can't do a whole lot passively, so we have to concentrate mostly on the active components. So historically, we would send somebody into the clinic and say, let's do all of the things that you have to be there for up front and get your pain under control by putting you on machines and working with you hands-on, and then transition to the more active components, the exercise, the stretching, and do all of that from a distance. Now, because we have situations where the injured worker can't get into work, can't get into therapy, we now have the capacity to try and arrange for their care such that it goes from beginning to end. So it's not ideal under all circumstances. Obviously, it's always better to be in the hands of your healthcare provider and being in the office physically. But there are some circumstances where most of what could be delivered in the clinic can be done remotely with the right adjustments. So what we do is we evaluate the patient as best as we can from a distance. So you can imagine there's certain things that you can do. You can look at someone's ability to move. You can look at their ability to function, assume different positions. You can evaluate their workspace, things along those lines. You can talk to them about their pain, their feelings, what they're feeling, how they're feeling, and when they're feeling, and make some decisions on what might be helpful to them. And then go through some guided exercise, some postural correction, things that you might be able to do to help somebody find some relief, and then set the path for their resolution. Now, the reason why telerehab sometimes works better for people than the in-clinic experience is because there's two things that the therapy experience hinges on: your ability to have access and engagement to care. So whether that's in-clinic or remote care, access and engagement are critical. So access from a remote care situation is almost better, because now you can get to the therapist not truly on demand, but certainly a lot easier than you can when you need to get in your car and go deal with traffic, sit in a waiting room, etc. You're now able to have expanded hours and see them a little more conveniently. So the access increases. It's also the opportunity to message a therapist between sessions and have a relay of asynchronous care. So access increases, and then engagement. So you have to have a patient who's willing to start to do exercises on their own, to engage in question and answer sessions, to modify their activity, etc. When you're dealing with telerehab, because you rely a little bit more on that asynchronous component, we have a patient portal where you would actually upload exercises to where the patient can see videos. They can watch a video of me explaining to them what's going on with them, personalized messages from me to them about exactly how they need to modify their needs at work, talk about their expectations, etc. So you can leverage the engagement piece a little bit easier when you're dealing with someone remote. So those are some of the benefits of seeing patients from a distance, but for the most part, it's always better to see them in person. What we're faced with now is the dilemma where we're pushing people, if they're able to, connect into telerehab, and then slowly we're going to have to find the right medium as the weeks unfold here of how do we get these people back into the clinic for the ones that have to be in there, and how do we allow the people who can continue to get return to work by going with remote care, how do we allow them to successfully transition from remote care back to work without ever being in an in-clinic experience? So I guess if I had to deliver any message to you this morning, it's that this is going to become more and more popular. It's already really spiked from our end. We see a ton of patients entering into the program, but the unknown area is how long will it last that people will be interested in continuing care in this capacity, and is it something that we can really easily pull the brakes on to say to people, yes, you could see it from a distance, but we really want you to be in the clinic. So those are a few of the things that we're considering and some things that we're working through on our end. But if I had to end on one note, it would be that the outcomes that we're seeing for telerehab are in many cases equivalent, if not superior, to what we're seeing in the clinic when you have the right patient under the right circumstances. Now we've opened the door a little wider, so we expect the patients are going to come along a little slower, and there'll be some patients that we have to really push back into the clinic. So that's, I guess at this point I can open up to a few questions if we have any.
Diane, do you have any questions for Brian?
Yeah. Yes, Brian, do you guys outsource your telerehab program?
No, that's a good question. So the telerehab, while it seems like you could just get a healthcare provider on one side of the screen and a patient on the other side, and they could engage in this type of meaningful experience, it doesn't always work like that. So the ability to connect with somebody is not hard, but the ability to try and figure out what's going on with them without putting your hands on them is a little bit more difficult. So in order to control the quality of it, we have a team of therapists in-house, and we have them go through extensive training to make sure that they're comfortable with dealing with handling patients from a distance. So these are all therapists that we employ and we train in-house. And at this point, because it's not going on that much in the healthcare industry, it just is not something that there's enough training out there for. That might all change as a result of this, but right now they have to go through the training, and those are only people that we train in-house.
I know you touched on this a little bit, but maybe you can expand it a little bit. How is the results comparable to when they come into brick and mortar? And is this, when they have these visits with you, are they videoed so that you have this information for future use to refer back to?
Good question, and I'll start with the videoing. So a very gray area. Our vendor that we use for the platform gives us the ability to record all the sessions. We wanted that capability in case it ever came on the radar that someone wanted to be able to view or review these sessions. As a matter of privacy, we don't record every session on every injured worker. What we do record is snippets of it. If I wanted to be able to record me explaining something to someone or demonstrating a certain exercise, I would record it and then make it available for the patient to see later. But we have to get a certain amount of permission for that, because as you can imagine, it's one thing to get on screen with somebody and have a certain comfort level, but you never know what's going to go on in the background when you have the cameras rolling. So fortunately, we haven't had too many surprises, but for the most part, we play it safe and record only the little pieces that we can. At some point, there might be an impetus from one of our customers to say they want all of it memorialized, and we can do that. And then as far as tracking outcomes goes, we do our best to replicate what we would do with the in-clinic experience as far as tracking their motion, their strength, and their function. And what we've seen is, again, in the model that we had previously, where we would take a person from an in-clinic experience to telerehab and have this kind of hybrid model, we would find that hybrid model would work just as well as in clinic with the outcomes. But we had the advantage under those circumstances of having that hands-on session and really cherry picking the right patients that we knew would benefit from this. Under these times, the reason, obviously, we're going to see here in a couple of weeks if the outcomes are the same. But now we're putting some people in there that aren't necessarily the best equipped for it. Post-surgical patients who have no option. They really should be in the clinic, but we're doing our best to keep them moving and continue continuity of care. So at this point, I would say if we pick the right patient at the right time, you can expect the outcomes are equivalent. But in these times where we're opening the door a little bit wider, you can expect that there'll be some tail off, and people really have to push into the clinic to get the right outcome.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Brian. We so appreciate your time. There are handouts that are attached to this webinar, and you can find them on your screen. There's a little side area, and if you click on the handouts, you can get handouts for each of the speakers. So next we have William Davis, and he is with Hannah Brophy. William?
Thanks, Wendy. Hi, everybody. Bill Davis with the Santa Rosa office of Hannah Brophy. So we've all discussed those big issues of COVID-19, the AOE, COE, the death cases, the exposures, and we're going to keep talking about those for a long time. They're important. But there's other areas where that long arm of COVID-19 can reach into your cases and you didn't expect them. We're going to talk about 3 of those. We're going to talk about temporary disability where somebody was doing modified duty. We're going to talk about the possibility of a pure site claim where there wasn't even exposure, and the impact on those remote workers. But before we get into those, let's talk about COVID-19 playing out in real time. Like I said, I'm in Santa Rosa. We recently had a police officer die from complications of COVID-19. And the police chief was kind enough to give an interview that said this officer died in the line of duty, even though we don't know how she was exposed. Now, who wants to be the claims adjuster walking that statement back in your case? And it's not just the frontline police officers either. There's also a case in the Midwest where there was a woman that was a grocery store clerk. She got COVID-19 and died. And her family gave the interview that the only reason she got COVID-19 was because she kept working and she wanted to take care of her community. They're happening as we speak, and we need to consider the optics as we go along. So let's get started on our first topic. Is temporary disability available when modified duty is no longer available because of a shelter-in-place order, or maybe the business isn't essential? Well, let's consider that employee that was out there doing modified duty. Their employer was accommodating their work restrictions, and they were working right along until all of a sudden they can't anymore. And why not? Well, it's shelter in place or non-essential business. Do they get temporary disability? There's not a clear answer on this. I have seen solid opinions by some very smart people that go both directions here. The reason there's no clear answer, we've got an unprecedented situation. So we're going to have to look to analogous situations. Now, like Wendy said, there's a handout. I'm going to talk about a few cases. They're in the handout. You're going to need Flexus to be able to get to the cases. And if you don't have that, just email me. I'll send them to you. So let's consider that first case, the manpower case. Now here we had an employee who was working as modified duties. His employer terminated him because they said it was for good cause. And of course he disagreed. So they had a trial and the judge said that the employer did not meet their burden of proving good cause. So the employee got temporary disability because the reasoning it wasn't working had nothing to do with his own actions, had nothing to do with his misconduct. It was due to situations outside his control. And there's our analogy. We've got people who aren't working due to situations totally outside their control. And it's not due to their misconduct. Now that was a 2006 case. We moved forward to a board panel decision, the Bedoya case, in 2018. Here we had somebody who was going to be working modified duty. The reason they weren't, there was a plant closure and layoffs. Here they got their temporary disability. The reason they're not working was not due to their misconduct, not due to their actions, and had nothing to do with their unwillingness to work. And that's what we come down to, is the reason they're not able to work due to something totally outside their control. That's our analogy. We have injured workers who would be working, except they can't, and they wanted to. So what do we do here? Well, like I said, it could go either direction. You could cut off TD completely, send them out to get EDD benefits just like everybody else. Or you could pay them their temporary disability. The conservative approach here would be to pay the temporary disability, but to reserve rights to a credit with future objections and petition for credit. Now, you get credit in that for the unemployment benefits as well, but you must petition. We're no longer allowed to just take credit because we want to. You have to petition under Rule 10.555. Like I said, there's a difference of opinion. There's some people that say no TD, no way, no how. We're just gonna have to wait for a case to go up and tell them. But our best practice here is to be consistent in how you handle these issues. Come up with a firm policy and stick to it across the board. Don't go another way on that employee that you like a little better. Identify those cases and find where the TD stopped and find out why. And get your notices and your petitions out. And if you're not sure what to do in that case, Call up your local workers' comp attorney and dump it in our laps, and we'll take care of it for you. So, our next topic. What about those pure psych claims from being coughed on while you're bagging groceries? We can expect to see some of these. We can see a spike in claims from essential employees, all the way from the grocery baggers that were near a coughing customer. You might have a food delivery driver where somebody actually answered the door and handed them cash instead of doing no contact. You could have a truck driver who claims he has heart palpitations and started sweating whenever he had to touch that fuel pump and dieseling up his truck. It could come from any. Now, there's going to be nothing different than the normal psych claims. The only real difference is the basis of the claim and the optics. They're going to have a built-in sympathy factor. And that goes right along with the rural construction of the board, in which a judge wants to be the one who decides that these essential workers don't get a psych. These claims are going to be easy to make. They're purely subjective, and they're on a set stage. But they still have to prove that there's an injury. They still have to prove AOE ceiling. They still have to prove predominant causation. But they do have that set stage of a fear that's out there, a fear of being infected. And this could also impact those employees who've been with you for less than 6 months. They might be able to complain it's a catastrophic type injury, warranting permanent disability. This is particularly true after the new Wilson case, where catastrophic injury is pretty much your impact on the person. So we need to look at whether the person has a fear of contracting the virus and whether that's a standalone psych injury. And it probably might be. The key would be whether their fear is objectively reasonable and greater than that seen by the general public. So what do we do with these? How do we be proactive with these claims? If you get one, I would suggest you immediately call your investigator and do a social media check. For the most part, people are stupid with what they put on social media. We see it every day. I would also go for a quick panel QME. Let's get this out there right now. You might even do a quick priority conference. Let's get AOE CEU on the table as soon as we can. But we also need to keep in mind that some of these might be legitimate. There is a bit of disaster fatigue out there. I know here in Santa Rosa, we've got a bit of it going on with, say, our dispatchers. We had a couple big fires. One of them burned down half the town. And we had dispatchers where the fire was going right around their building. And they stayed at work listening to their colleagues die on the radio. And they're still working. And now they're taking those pandemic calls. Could this be a cumulative effect where they just can't do anymore? So watch out for that straw that broke the camel's back. Some of these might be an easy claim to make to try to make a buck. And some of them might be legitimate. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Remote workers. Who's responsible when your remote worker trips over the cat at home? It's not the cat's fault. Nothing is ever the cat's fault. An interesting issue. The answer, of course, the employer is responsible. The employer is always responsible. But how is this COVID-19 related? Well, consider that there are numerous people who at a seemingly moment's notice became a remote worker. They had no opportunity to set up anything remotely ergonomic in their home. In fact, I'm going to bet that a good deal of the people today are sitting here on a couch watching this. We've got people working at kitchen tables, working at a hammock out back. If you do a remote search, do a Google search of remote working environments, you're going to find people working on clothes hampers with a chair in front. I saw one picture of an ironing board as a desk, which is at least adjustable, so you can make it a standing desk. You see pictures of people using a washing machine, or my favorite, a flop-down tailgate. What you don't see in these pictures is anything remotely ergonomic, including an ergonomic chair. You'll find a lot of people working at the regular kitchen chairs. What are we going to get from this? Repetitive stress injuries. We're going to see a lot more carpal tunnel, a lot more shoulder strain, a lot more neck strain, text neck. Are we going to see more psych claims from people who are cooped up with their spouse and kids? We're going to see psych claims from Baby Shark on a loop for 5 days straight. We may not see those, but we might see other areas where there's a lot of liability. Let's consider the Tidwell case, 2017 out of Oakland, fairly recent, but before the pandemic. Miss Tidwell was working at home. She had a pre-existing non-industrial condition that put her in a wheelchair, but her employer accommodated her and gave her a remote working environment. One day, while transferring herself from the toilet to her wheelchair, she fell and hurt herself. Was she entitled to workers' comp benefits? The board sure thought so. The applicant was given permission to work at home as a reasonable accommodation, and she was making reasonable and anticipated use of the premises. It would be just like she fell at work. We have another case where an employee was told he had to work at home because there was a workplace investigation into his conduct. While at home, he wanted to change a light bulb. So using the OSHA-approved method of standing on an unstable chair, he fell. He got workers' comp benefits. Reasonable and anticipated use of the premises. Now, I didn't find a whole lot of California cases on this, thankfully. We will have more later, but there are other cases from other states that'll show us what might happen. We have a case where an employee actually tripped over their dog in the garage. And they got workers' comp benefits. That was in Oregon. We have 2 cases out of Pennsylvania and Minnesota where employees had their offices upstairs. They were walking down the stairs to get a cup of coffee, which is reasonable and anticipated, tripped and fell and hurt themselves and got workers' comp benefits. So these are things we need to think about is, did they get hurt at home and why? And was it during their working hours? Or was it something that happened later? We also need to consider the personal comfort doctor. You've got an employee who might get hurt making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the kitchen. Was it theirs? They're making it for their kids for the off hours? What would happen if they were making this in the kitchen at work? The home is the workplace, and they're making reasonable and anticipated use of the premises. You might find liability. Suppose they were injured because they stepped on a Lego going to the bathroom at night with the lights off. Well, of course, that's not workers' comp. What if they claim it is? How do you prove it wasn't? How do you prove it didn't happen during the workday when they should have been during their work hours? That is going to be difficult. We've got issues of investigation. The employee still has to prove AOE. How do you disprove their claims? How do you send an investigator to their door? It might be reasonable for them to say, you're not coming in, we're under quarantine. I'm not letting a single person in my front door. You deny the claim then because they're not cooperating with investigation, or are they reasonable and not cooperating? It's a whole new world of potential liability out there. And let's think of something else. Let's go back to our first point with the injured worker was on modified duty. Suppose that injured worker was doing their modified duty in an office, and the employer was providing them with ergonomic equipment. That was the accommodation, maybe a stand-up desk, an ergonomic chair, an ergonomic keyboard. Now what do? You have to provide those when they're working at home? We probably have to. They have an obligation to provide accommodations to people at work, and the home is now the workplace. If they provided that ergonomic equipment at the office, they might have to provide it at home. And if you don't, and they can't do their job, are you looking at temporary discipline? I think you might be. And so we need to look at ways that we can limit this, ways that we can try to bring our exposure back down and dial it in a little bit. One thing an employer might look at, if you're requiring your remote worker to work at home due to a health emergency like COVID-19, you might limit where you allow them to work. You might tell them, you have to work actually at home. You can't go out in public. You can't find a beach that may be open somewhere. Sonoma County, they're not. Here they are other places. You can't go out in a coffee shop that you might find open. Stay at home and limit that liability. What's our best practice here? Try to have consistent workplace policies. Tell people what those policies are. Tell them the working hours you're expecting them to be on duty, so that if they make a claim for something outside those hours, maybe you can limit it that way. Provide ergonomic documentation showing them what to do and how to avoid those repetitive stress injuries. I know when I started working at home, I started noticing my wrists were sore, my fingers were numb. Started having to do all the things to keep that from happening. Try to limit those injuries. Provide simple ergonomic equipment if you can. You can even brand it for your company. The wrist pads, the mouse pads. What we're working on here is minimizing risk of injury and minimizing liability should it happen. But we need to recognize the home is the workplace. And if they're making reasonable and anticipated use of that workplace, we're facing potential liability for workers' comp benefits. And I'm sure we're going to be seeing quite a few of these. So are there any questions?
Ann, do you have any questions for Bill?
I certainly do. Bill, question for you. What if the injured worker applies for unemployment through EDD? Does the carrier or TPA employer, do they still have the responsibility to continue paying for TD?
Well, first we want to know if they did, and we get a credit if they did. We go back to our petition for credit. So if they've applied for EDD benefits, we're going to take a credit for unemployment benefits. We're going to take a credit for every dollar they got. And I understand it's pretty substantial now.
Well, that leads to another question that might be on people's minds. Why do we actually have to file a petition for credit? Can't we just assert that it wasn't due?
Well, we used to do that all the time, and I loved it. But now we have a new rule, 10.0555, that says if you're going to take a credit, you have to file that petition. And it actually lays out what has to be in the petition. I filed one just the other day. And if you don't file it, you might be facing sanctions, and they won't let you have your credit. So it's always at the board discretion under the Maples case. But without that petition, you're not going to get it.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thanks, Bill. And
Thanks.
again, Bill's handouts are available, and then we'll have Bill come back for a final thought. Thanks, Bill.
And if somebody doesn't have access to Lexis, just let me know and I'll send you those cases.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Next we have Chris Bowen. Chris actually knows what Bill is talking about because Chris is at the beach and she is not able to access the beach. So Chris, can you talk to us a little bit about liens?
Oh, I thought you were going to say, can you talk to me about the beach? Yes, so let's talk about liens and the WCAB current status. So right now, the DIR website just updated their site yesterday, and then they have a listing of all the offices which are open for virtual capacity, which right now it's actually everywhere except Eureka. So yesterday they did open the Bakersfield board, which was the last one that was not open, and that's obviously just virtual. But if you go to the DIR website and in the first section, it says DWC. If you click on that, there's a link. You guys all know me and I like those links. And there's a list of the offices and how to get a hold of the judges in there. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But effective 4/13, which was just Monday, mandatory settlement conferences, priority conferences, status conferences, and all expedited hearings will be heard telephonically. So what does that mean? Well, usually it's court call and you have to pay for court call. It's around $54 to call in. But right now, their judges have a toll-free line and it's posted on the DWC website. So you can just click on that link that gives you all the conference judges lines. All the trials and lien conferences have been continued until further notice. Most of them have been pushed back. It's pretty reasonable time frame. For example, we had one that was April 30th, and we just received notice that it is now going to be May 6th. So it's only a week difference. It may get pushed back again, but you're probably just starting to see the same thing. And then the WCABs are only allowing e-filing right now. So if you do not have access to e-file, let us know. We can, file whatever documents you need. And be patient with the judges. This is all new for them too. A lot of them don't have the savvy tech that a lot of the adjusters do. So they're dealing with it as well, and it's new, trying to use email instead of seeing people in person. And then lastly, for this topic, the electronic signatures on settlement documents, applications, pleadings, petitions, and motions are being allowed right now. So you are able to still have your settlement documents signed electronically. And again, if you don't have that capability, you can ask us to help. You can ask anybody to help who does have that capability, and we can do the electronic version of that. So everything is still moving forward. All right, let's move on to liens. So what's going on with the liens during all of this? Well, now is a great time to attempt settlement of your liens. Most of the lien claimants are actually willing to work with you right now, and they seem almost more willing to settle. Depends on who it is, of course. There's many that are working for larger corporations and they're still working. Some of them have allowed their supervisors, the lien claimant supervisors, especially over at like medical lien management, all of your favorites, some of the supervisors are working. So we're able to talk to them directly, and you probably can too. If you don't want to deal with them, obviously, let us know, we'll help you. We love them. So they also try to consolidate all the files together right now. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that. You can still settle your files on an individual basis. Be careful though that you are not settling just to settle. And what I mean by that is you're at this period where the lien claimants are calling and they're bugging you and you're not sure about the actual proof of the file or the defenses. So be careful. They're going to try to take advantage of you right now, thinking that you're in a hurry to settle. Use all of your regular defenses. Go ahead and wait for the lien conference if it's already set and you're not ready to settle at this time, because they aren't pushed out that much farther. Don't let them scare you and bully you into settling early by saying that, well, you don't know when these will ever be done. Or the other day we had a phone call from a lien claimant saying that there was a defense attorney on the file and they were closed down, and we knew nobody's actually closed down. So things like that where they try to manipulate you into settling something because of whatever reason they come up with. It's kind of hasn't changed much there. But use your capabilities of what you already have. Run a bill review. If you need help doing that, let us know. We'll run a bill review for you if your bill review companies aren't up and running right now. And then obviously you have all your internal resources probably still available for your company. You have your external, us, your defense attorneys. We're all still here to help you. And obviously, if you want to even just run something by us an opinion, whatever it is, just let us know. We'll absolutely help you out on that. Free. Okay, so the last topic, we're going to talk about walkthroughs. This is kind of fun right now because everybody's struggling, and believe it or not, walkthroughs, this is a great time with the electronic signatures that are being approved for settlement documents to go through. There's many injured workers right now who are furloughed, and they would love to get their disability settled so they can get that lump sum, or if they're receiving future medical care and you've skipped it previously or you're trying to settle it, now's a great time. The judges are still doing these electronically. It's kind of a hybrid, so it's electronic e-file, but then we're able to obviously go back and forth with the judges. We know these judges personally because our walkthrough team are there. So a lot of times the judge will just set it for a status conference, but right now we're seeing a little more leniency where the judge will actually email us back and go over something with us before they just automatically set it. So just reach out to your injured workers. They'll be anxious to settle right now. You will have to be careful that some of these injured workers may go back on temporary disability right now, go back to the doctor and be taken off work. And that's because they're worried about maybe not getting their unemployment furlough checks, but they're already in the system for their temporary disability checks. We did already see one of those where someone went back into their doctor and was taken off work. And I'm not saying it's not legitimate, but you just have to be careful. You may have to talk to the doctors about that. Let's see what else we're going to talk about. A little bit on the doctors asking to be taken off work. You can question the doctors, ask them if it's different from the COVID payments and what's going on with while they're taken off work. The case in chief files are also settling right now. So if you're looking to get your case in chief files back on settlement, you can do that. We can process those payments. And then how many settlements are you able to get right now? Well, definitely you can work on those. We're seeing quite a few, probably 6 to 10 per day that are coming through. So hopefully you're able to do the same. And we can talk about that as well when there's any questions. So I think that's about it. So if there's any questions, we'll start taking those.
Ann, do you have any questions for Chris?
Absolutely. Hey, Chris, now that you're in the middle of all of this, what are you seeing as far as settlements since the stay-at-home order?
Well, at first we weren't sure how it was going to work out, but since the judges are actually able to work now and they're kind of on track, we're seeing settlement approvals in 1 day, 2 days. It's just a crazy fast. So I think so far as of this morning, we're at 118 approvals that we have for injured workers since this started, which is an amazing number. It's almost our normal rate, which I thought for sure it would be less than half. And then for lien settlements, I thought the same thing. I thought it would drop significantly. But as of yesterday, I think we settled 451 liens so far since the stay-at-home order. So we're very excited about the numbers.
Now, you said that this is about the same as pre-COVID-19 numbers, or is this actually accelerated?
It's, well, the actual approvals are coming in faster, but we're seeing about the same number of files coming in. I thought there'd be a dip, but I actually think it's going to increase before it'll decrease because of the injured workers wanting to settle right now and get their money faster.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris. We certainly appreciate your comments. So next, we're going to talk about records. And we're really fortunate at Macro Pro. We had a pandemic plan in place and we were able to execute it pretty quickly. We are able to get our employees working remotely, and we still have some employees working in the office. And as you can well imagine, we are practicing social distancing, cleaning between shifts, following state mandates and guidelines, just as other essential businesses are. We are working from 3 a.m. until midnight. So really, we just have 3 hours that we are not working around the clock each day. And because we had a pandemic plan in place, we were able to limit the downtime for our clients. So there are a few questions that folks have been asking us, which I'm sure will apply to all document retrieval services. One, and the first question that I hear almost mostly is, can we still order records? Absolutely, you can still order records. There are quite a few people who are working diligently to facilitate the process of ordering records. The big question that I'm getting more than anything else is about the custodians. And here's what you should know about the custodians. When COVID-19 first came on the radar, prior to becoming a pandemic, the custodians were not allowing employees into their offices. So they were actually, let me go back a little, they were allowing employees, non-employees, to come into their offices. They were taking people's temperatures and they were screening them for fevers and coughs and put them in an observation area. And once those folks cleared the observation period, they were allowed to come in and scan the records. The minute the coronavirus became a pandemic, the custodians implemented their best practices and shut down their facilities to anyone who was not an employee. The thing to know here is we're still getting records and we're still processing orders, as are other copy services. But records aren't going to be obtained as quickly as in the past. Imagine the amount of copy services in California. There are well over 250, and each of them schedule appointments with all of the different custodians. So if you can imagine a line at the door and there are folks wanting to get in to scan records, imagine if that line went around the building, kind of like that 7 a.m. Costco line that I have been in. Crazy, but we've all been in a line. And so now, if you can imagine that, now the custodians, there's maybe just one or two in each facility. And they have to do the work of all those copy services because they can no longer have these folks come into their offices. So they're helping to process these orders on your behalf. So this means it's more like rush hour traffic at 4:45 p.m. on Highway 680 or 580 or even Highway 101. And well, that's a lot of gridlock traffic and it's pretty slow. I have sat in that traffic before. Well, there's been a phrase used by one of the department leaders at Macro Pro. It's not business as usual at this time, it's business as unusual. It's important to remember that it's not business as usual when it comes to getting your records from your document retrieval services. So that's something to sort of keep in mind when you're ordering records. So let's talk about the best way to get your records. And the best way to order your records is online. Go to the order form portion of your document retrieval company's website and place the order online. When the reason is when you key in the information, you provide everything to your document retrieval company, and it's in the system at that point. We can begin serving those authorizations and subpoenas. And at this time, we're serving by mail. We can't serve in person anymore, and we believe that this is one of our best practices. We don't know if every facility is going to accept that, but we feel in order to do the best job for our clients, we have to get you in queue to get your records. Remember that big line around the block I just talked about? That big line. So because we have employees working from home and we have limited employees in the office, we, like other copy services, don't have the manpower at this time to do what we used to do in days past, when you could just email the information on the records you need and someone would take that information, enter it into the system, and get it ready to be served. It can be done, but it's going to take a little bit longer. It can be days before that can happen, depending on the volume coming in via email. So it's best really to place your orders online. And to let you know, the volume at this time, it's enormous because people have the time to request records. So if you can key your request directly into your document retrieval company's system, that's probably going to be your edge, going to get you into that queue pretty quickly. Our customer service team is here to help you. Again, we're a little short-staffed, as are all other copy services. And remember, when working with your copy service, to have patience and give them a little bit of time to get back to you. Be patient while you're waiting for that phone call or that email to be returned. Customer service people working remotely, they don't have everything at their fingertips like they do at the office. So patience really is the recommendation. And when it comes to records delivery, we believe it is best practices to deliver everything electronically to our clients at this point. We don't know how long the coronavirus can last on surfaces. And when we receive records from a custodian on paper, that's a concern for our employees as well as for you. So we've already set protocols in place with custodians to see if we can get paperless records. We're very fortunate at MacroPro that we have a top-notch IT department. But if you can remember, not all copy services have this. So please know that things can take a little longer for some companies that can others. And again, patience is something that's always asked for, especially in this time, which we know is pretty uncertain. Diane, do we have any questions?
Hi there.
Hi.
Yes, we do. So early on, we can recall when people were talking about the coronavirus, and they were talking about HIPAA being lightened or lessened. Can you tell us a little bit about why that is and who it applied to?
Yeah, when the coronavirus turned into a pandemic, HIPAA was softened a little, but not for your document retrieval services. This was more really for the doctors to have access to the information that they need more freely so that they can do the jobs that they need to do with the folks that may or may not be infected with the coronavirus.
And then the next question, you had talked a little bit about this, but do you know what percentage of doctors' offices and hospitals are providing records?
I don't actually have a hard number. That's a really good question, but I don't have a hard number on that. There are quite a few doctors' offices. I would say closer, no, I'm not going to give you a number because I'm going to be held to that, but I would say if the doctor's offices are open and if the staff is available in those doctor's offices, they're definitely providing records. Hospitals are releasing records, but remember that line that we talked about, that like the Costco line, like everyone else during this time, we're in that line. So they are releasing records. It's just taking a little tiny bit longer.
Yes. Well, today, we didn't get an opportunity to talk about this earlier, Wendy, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spring that on you, but
Okay.
our IT department and client services are telling us that there are only about 25% of all custodians that are open. And therefore, that line you're talking about and the gridlock you're talking about is very real. And records in some cases are not being delivered. So you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of gridlock and we just need to be patient.
Thank you, Diane. Certainly appreciate that. So we would like to get a final thought from all of our presenters. Diane, I'm happy for you to stay on the screen. So if everybody wants to come on back. Brian, can you give us your final thought?
Brian cannot, but this is Carrie with MedRisk. He had to take some patients, so he had to jump off the call. And his final thought, he said, you know, with the universal access to Wi-Fi, pretty much everyone has a computer, tablet, phone, something to be able to do telemedicine, telerehab. The technology has been available for numerous years now, and it's been available, at least with MedRisk, we've been offering it for 2.5 years. The pandemic has just kind of forced people to accept the technology and hopefully understand that there's still a way to treat patients without being in a clinic.
Bill, do you have a final thought for us?
Thanks, Wendy. Keep in mind that with COVID-19 and the employer's response to it, you can have a far-reaching effect in cases you didn't expect. You could be looking at TD for someone who should be on modified duty and they were actually working it. You could be looking at a pure psych claim from just showing up to do their regular job. Or you could be presented with a claim for an unsafe work environment that the employer knows nothing about and has no control over whatsoever. You don't know anything about somebody's home. And to top it all off, you could have a sympathetic applicant and a willing accomplice at the board. So could be facing some uncharted waters here.
Thank you, Bill. Chris?
Well, I just want to say I'm very proud of everybody for working from home and making all of this work. The adjusters, the judges, everyone. It's amazing that everybody's able to come together and still handle claims.
Thanks, Chris. So my final thought is patience. If you can remember to be patient, not only with your document and retrieval company, but be patient with your colleagues, be patient with your supervisors and your managers, and be patient with your at-home colleagues, the four-legged type and your younger, related to you, two-legged type of coworkers. If we all have a little bit of patience, we're going to get through this a little bit easier. And remember, everyone's doing the best they can for you under the circumstances. And one last thing, also, if you need records nationwide, you can get them. Not all areas of the country are affected, the same as California and New York. So ask your document retrieval company and you can get the records that you need. And thanks, Diane, for sharing that number of 25%. And Diane, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, one last thought I have, and that is for all of you that are using medical authorization forms as a regular part of business, I'm going to ask you to ditch those and start using a all-purpose authorization form. It'll widen the breadth of the records that you're able to get. For example, you cannot get employment records with a medical authorization form. Things are already at a gridlock, slow pace in getting records. So let's make sure that we utilize a form that's going to help us get the records and not have to go back to the injured worker time again to get records. And I see here that Wendy put up a video that I did for Work Comp Central. It is about accomplishments versus obstacles. And in this really tough time, we a lot of times can't see our accomplishments. And so this is just kind of a TED Talks type of speech, 7 minutes, very quick. I hope it inspires you so that we can all do what we're in charge of, and that is to try to make the injured worker as whole as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you, Diane. The link to that TED Talk, which is a positive 7 minutes that you can listen to, the link is on the handout that you'll have. Thank you so much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it, and we appreciate all of our participants. If you logged in through your confirmation, you will be receiving a 1-hour CEU credit in the next 36 hours via email that you can open. If you didn't log in through that portal, then you won't be getting a certificate. So have a wonderful day, and we'll get through this together. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. How'd that go?
Hang on, Chris.